'80s rock music was characterized by big hair and bigger amps. Oh, and don't forget spandex. Like any musical fad, hair bands didn't last forever. From cameos and cult classics like Wayne's World to helming ridiculous reality TV shows, here's what happened to these famous '80s hair bands. Guns N' Roses were stratospheric in the late 1980s and early 90s, consistently smashing chart and tour records. Despite the band's success, its two leading egos, vocalist Axl Rose and guitarist Slash, simply couldn't get along. In 1996, Rose brought in his friend Paul Tobias to play rhythm guitar, prompting Slash to leave the band in October of that year. Q magazine reported that drummer Matt Sorum called Tobias the Yoko Ono of Guns N' Roses. Axl Rose continued touring under the name Guns N' Roses, even though he was the only original member of the band, and began work on the electronic-infused record Chinese Democracy. The album racked up over $13 million in recording costs by 2005, according to the New York Times, before finally being released in 2008. No thanks was given to Dr. Pepper, which Exclaim says offered everyone in America, except Slash and Buckethead, a free drink if the album came out that year. In 2012, Lookswing reported that Rose said the band would never reunite in this lifetime. 4 years later, Guns N' Roses did, in fact, reunite for the aptly named Not in This Lifetime tour. The tour ended up stretching into 2019 before the band's tour plans were halted due to COVID-19. In 2016, Slash told Ultimate Classic Rock, "We all were pretty positive the reunion would never happen, so it's still sort of blowing our minds." Mۆtley Crüe was the quintessential glam rock hair band in the early 80s, but come 1987, their legacy almost came to an end. That year, Newsweek reports that founding bassist Nikki Sixx overdosed on heroin. Despite being declared legally dead in the ambulance, Sixx was revived with 2 shots of adrenaline by a paramedic who just so happened to be a Crüe fan. The group went sober in 1989 and released their most successful album, Dr. Feelgood. In 1992, Ultimate Classic Rock reports that lead singer Vince Neil left the band, but returned just a few years later in 1997. Mۆtley Crüe went on to tour for nearly 2 more decades, culminating in a worldwide farewell tour with Alice Cooper in 2015.
Mۆtley fans are still going to be Mۆtley fans, whether we're number 1 or, 101.
The band signed a cessation of touring contract that year with a vow that they'd never tour again. Yet, 4 years later, Netflix released The Dirt, a biopic based on the group's 2001 autobiography. The popularity of the film convinced the band to literally blow up the cessation of touring contract. In summer 2022, Mۆtley Crüe will begin a stadium tour with Poison, Def Leppard, and Joan Jett. After a hugely successful 1980s, British hairband Def Leppard faced tragedy at the beginning of the 1990s. Loudwire recounts that guitarist Steve Clark died in January 1991 due to a mix of prescription drugs and alcohol. The band continued to tour at a rampant pace, with iHeartRadio reporting that they broke a Guinness World Record in 1995 for performing 3 concerts on 3 continents in a single day. In the US, Def Leppard was hugely popular, especially among women. Guitarist Phil Collen recounts in his memoir, Adrenalized, Life, Def Leppard, and Beyond, that a total stranger even approached him in an elevator and initiated a sexual encounter with him unprompted. Def Leppard released their biopic, Hysteria, The Def Leppard Story, in 2001 and continued releasing hit albums. They recorded a cover for Paul McCartney's tribute album and did shows with Taylor Swift, Kiss, Journey, Cheap Trick, and many other popular artists. After a 2019 Las Vegas residency, the band made plans to link up with Mۆtley Crüe, Poison, and Joan Jett for the stadium tour, which would be postponed until summer 2022 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. After becoming one of the top hair bands of the late 80s, Poison sent 20,000 CDs to U.S. troops during the Gulf War. According to Moondance Jam, this act earned them a thank you from then Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney. According to Tone Deaf, guitarist C.C. DeVille and lead singer Bret Michaels got into a fight backstage at the 1991 MTV Video Music Awards. The guitarist was subsequently fired, but got his job back 5 years later. Around that time, Michaels was hooking up with Canadian actress Pamela Anderson, with a sex tape of the pair surfacing on the internet in 1998, according to MTV. The band continued to tour and make records, frequently breaking off to make their own solo albums. At a 2006 show in Atlanta, Philly Voice recalls that Michaels and bassist Bobby Dahl got into a fight on stage, with Michaels throwing his mic at Dahl and the bassist slamming his guitar into the singer. If you think Michaels is dramatic enough to be featured on reality TV, he'd be in agreement. Since 2006, Michaels has appeared on 3 seasons of VH1's Rock of Love, where women competed for his affection. He also appeared on Celebrity Apprentice 3 and won. Poison has continued to tour, and they're scheduled to open for Mӧtley Crüe and Def Leppard in summer 2022.
It is going to be not just a stadium tour, it is the party of the summer.
After recording karaoke and road trip anthems like You Give Love a Bad Name and Livin' on a Prayer in the 1980s, Jon Bon Jovi and his band continued to rock out and stay supremely popular. In 1991, the band was going through the kind of rift that most hair bands were facing at the time, and Forbes recalls that Jon fired management and took over the band himself. Then, the band flew off to a Caribbean island to discuss their feelings and group dynamic. Enemy says that the band continued to stick together, except for bassist Alec John Such, who was later fired.
You got to a point where if you can't carry your weight, it's not fair to the rest of us. We couldn't sacrifice what we sounded like live. We could cover it up in the studio.
After the hugely successful 1995 tour, Bon Jovi took a 4-year hiatus to work on solo stuff before returning with the 2000 hit, It's My Life. Bon Jovi kept on releasing albums in the 2000s, virtually all of which were chart toppers. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Bon Jovi has played more than 2,600 concerts in more than 50 countries for over 34 million fans. The band's 15th album was supposed to come out in May 2020, followed by a world tour, but Jon Bon Jovi told Howard Stern that everything is on hold due to the coronavirus pandemic. The band released the album 2020 in October of that year and began touring again in 2022. Kiss pretty much owned the 1970s and early 80s, but in 1983, they felt it was time to wipe off their makeup and ditch their costumes. Fans weren't impressed, but singer Gene Simmons told Rolling Stone he felt the spirit of the band lived on. Tragically, drummer Eric Carr was diagnosed with cancer in 1991 and died at the age of 41, so the band's lineup was in a complete state of flux. At the 38th Grammy Awards, Ultimate Classic Rock recounts that rapper Tupac Shakur shocked the world by introducing Kiss in their full makeup and costumes yet again. USA Today reported that the band's 1996 reunion tour, in full costume, grossed $43.6 million, and they performed another reunion tour in 2000. Kiss went on tour with Aerosmith in 2003 and headlined the Rock the Nation tour alongside Poison. After a few years of sporadic shows, they returned to world touring and have more or less kept it up since. Their latest rendition of a farewell tour was supposed to play over 180 shows and grossed some $200 million. After several years of delays, Kiss is back on the road for their, quote, final tour ever in 2022. Despite frontman Dee Snider's insistence that Twisted Sister is not hair metal, we're going to include them in this list anyway. In the mid-80s, Twisted Sister was making bangers like We're Not Gonna Take It and I Wanna Rock. By 1987, different members left for different ventures, and the band officially disbanded according to Guitar World. Only Snider remained in the public eye by joining a couple lesser-known metal bands and eventually becoming a radio and TV personality. Later, in 2001, bassist Mark Mendoza even went so far as to say that he wanted Snider dead on an episode of VH1's Behind the Music. When the band finally reunited for a 9/11 benefit concert later that year, they performed sporting their 80s-era costumes, acknowledging that few people would be interested in any new music. Twisted Sister went on to play different festivals around the world to crowds often bigger than in their early days. This success was good news for Snider, who Fox News reports was broke by the mid-90s. In 2015, drummer A.J. Pirro died of a heart attack in his sleep, and the band subsequently announced their final tour. In a feat nearly unprecedented by their peers, they seem to have actually meant it. Their last show was in November 2016. By 1991, shock rocker Alice Cooper had recorded 19 albums, and not all of them were good. Yahoo writes that he openly refers to his 1980s records as blackout albums because he was so messed up on drugs he couldn't recall recording them. In the 1990s, Cooper was still making records with his band and performed on recordings by some of rock's biggest stars. Apart from making music and touring near constantly since the 1960s, Cooper liked to cross pop culture lines. He popped onto the set of Wayne's World in 1992 and made cameos in The Simpsons and Tim Burton's adaptation of Dark Shadows. He was even in a Marvel comic.
I was not aware of that.
In 2014, Cooper was an opening act on Mۆtley Crüe's final tour. The next year, he performed in the supergroup Hollywood Vampires with Johnny Depp and Joe Perry. In 2018, Cooper played Herod in Andrew Lloyd Webber's Jesus Christ Superstar Live in Concert, which earned positive reviews from the New York Times. By the end of the 1980s, Van Halen had already switched out vocalist David Lee Roth for Sammy Hagar. After the replacement, Van Halen continued to hit #1 on the charts until 1996. According to Guitar World, Hagar left the band at that time following spats with Eddie Van Halen while recording the Twister soundtrack. Without a singer, guitarist Eddie Van Halen and his brother Alex ended up recording Respect the Wind, which was nominated for Best Rock Instrumental Performance at the Grammys. The band switched singers a couple times and subbed in Eddie's son Wolfgang for bassist Michael Anthony. In 2007, Roth finally returned, and Van Halen continued to play sold-out shows across the globe. Throughout their career, they were one of the best-selling bands of all time, selling more than 80 million albums worldwide and charting 13 Billboard #1 hits. In 2019, the band released yet another box set. Tragically, it would be their last. On October 6, 2020, the LA Times reported that Eddie Van Halen died of cancer after first announcing his diagnosis in 2001. After his father's death, Wolfgang Van Halen tweeted, "He was the best father I could ever ask for. Every moment I've shared with him on and off stage was a gift." Ozzy Osbourne has chided 80s glam rock bands before, but the so-called Prince of Darkness's 1986 album, The Ultimate Sin, is a quintessential hair metal record according to Sputnik Music and many others. Following his successful solo split from Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne went on what was to be his last tour in 1993, poignantly titled the No More Tours Tour. Needless to say, it wasn't his last tour. He continued to play live, including at his wildly successful Ozzfest. By the next century, a new generation of fans got acquainted with Ozzy Osbourne through his MTV reality shows. The Osbournes first did a show called The Osbournes from 2002 to 2005. They also did a show called Battle for Ozzfest, and Sharon Osbourne appeared on the X Factor UK. They also released a show on the Travel Channel called The Osbournes Want to Believe About Paranormal Activity. Ozzy announced yet again that he'd stop touring in 2018 with a No More Tours Tour 2. According to Blabbermouth, Ozzy says he'll still play gigs, but not world tours, though the second No More Tours tour has stretched into 2022. At age 71, Ozzy released yet another solo album, Ordinary Man, and louder reports that his wife Sharon thinks he has more albums in the works. Credited as being one of the founding glam metal hair bands of the 1980s, Ratt recorded 4 albums to mixed critical reviews. In the early 90s, the band came out with their 5th album and continued to tour, but guitarist Robin Crosby struggled to keep up due to a heavy drug addiction.
I wish to God I had any idea what I was dealing with.
After he returned from a tour in Japan, he checked into rehab. In 1994, Ultimate Classic Rock explained that Crosby was diagnosed with HIV, which eventually developed into AIDS. In a 1999 interview for VH1's Behind the Music, Crosby reflected that addiction and HIV had cost him his band, exorbitant amounts of money, and physical intimacy. Crosby died in 2002 of a heroin overdose at 42 years old. A mishmash of the original band members reunited for a tour in 2007 and released a new album in 2010. It would be their last to date. According to Blabbermouth, founding lead singer Stephen Pearcy announced in 2018 that he'd continue Ratt with bassist Juan Crucier. The band saw a surge in streams and exposure recently, thanks to a Geico commercial about new homeowners that love their house despite their rat problem. If you or anyone you know is struggling with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP 4357.